It's a war going on outside no man is safe from. I'm glad they gave Savage a second chance, and I hope he used it as a learning experience, even though he was provoked. This is a photo of me and two of my kids. They wouldn't be here if it wasn't for a mistake I made as a teen. One situation led me to meeting their mom, someone I would have never crossed paths with.
Oh no, my racist. I don't even be racing in that joint.
Hey, well, that's private property over there, so they don't let nobody over. That's how they do.
No, it's really this gate, because I used to be in this halfway house when there was a halfway house.
I got someone special coming on real soon, and we gonna dive in further, man. Stay locked in. Almost 7,000 bodies fell on them D.C. streets in a 20-year span between 1984 and 2004. 6,929 homicides to be exact. In this video, I wanted to dive in a little deeper and examine some of the events that occurred inside of that 20-year period from multiple angles. From the mindset of the children of the murder cap days, aka the crack era, and how they were affected, how some of them transitioned into killers. We're going to take a look at Potomac Gardens in the late 80s to mid 90s, police corruption in the city, specifically the Dirty Dozen case. Also, why the cycle of violence will still continue for years to come. This is my summary of the crack era in DC and plenty more. It's a lot to cover. Sit back, grab a drink or anything and check out the video. It was a leap year. Steve Jobs released the Macintosh computer. The game Tetris came out. A third-round pick named Michael Jordan was drafted by the Bulls.
For the forward at 6'6", 190.
The Reagan era. The infant stages of rap music.
84, the greatest year in hip-hop. Greatest records, greatest artists.
And the early stages of go-go.
Need money! Need money!
Law enforcement, the government, and the news reporters who reported on crime and the crime stats about the murder rate dropping at the top of that year in 84, they had no clue what was about to hit them over the head.
Begin tonight with crime here at home and overseas. From Washington today, there was a set of very encouraging statistics on the decline of crime in America.
That small victory will be short-lived. In a couple years, the numbers would increase after a smokable form of cocaine touched the streets of LA first, and then every city across America. In the city, you had the drug crews, hood wars, murder crews, dead bodies, investigations, RICOs, and heavy prison sentences. But let's slow it down. The coke was flowing heavy well before crack. A lot of folks who could afford the habit used it as recreation. People during that time thought it was a fun drug. You can party with it, snort it, get that rush and still function. It was safe to the majority of users who didn't overindulge. But in 1986, one man's death made Reagan sign the Anti-Drug Abuse Act, and that gave out football numbers.
Len Bias, the Maryland University basketball star.
Well, Len Bias.
Len Bias is why All-American basketball star Len Bias.
2 days ago, Len Bias was at the pinnacle of his career, drafted by the world champion Boston Celtics.
Yeah, I'm in the NBA now. I've got drafted, so now my dream has come true.
Len Bias was young, healthy, and a talented superstar basketball player out of Maryland. As I'm sure most of y'all tuning in probably know, but just for clarity and to paint the picture correctly, I gotta mention. So Len Bias did what up-and-coming players all dreamed of, making it to the league. But just 2 days after being selected by the Boston Celtics in the '86 NBA draft, he overdosed in his dorm after doing cocaine with friends, some of them who were teammates. He was given pure cocaine by a friend named Brian Tribble, who I can mention by name because all of this was thoroughly documented on several documentaries years ago.
The man who's accused of supplying basketball star Len Bias with a fatal dose of cocaine surrendered to the authorities today. Brian Tribble, a longtime friend of Bias, is charged with possession and distribution of cocaine. He's being held on $250,000 bail.
But Len Bias, of course, died, and the situation shocked the entire country. Brian was initially charged and acquitted of all charges related to the Bias case. As sad as the tragedy was, he didn't force him to take it. This all sort of tied back into D.C. as far as Brian Tribble and the cocaine thing, because later on, in 1990, Brian Tribble and 26 others were investigated by the feds. They claimed the group brought in 11 pounds of cocaine a week to the D.C. area in the late 80s. The indictment alleged that many of the members came from the Woodridge area in Northeast. And Brian Tribble ended up pleading guilty to conspiracy to distribute cocaine. The prosecutor said at one point, he was selling up to 22 pounds of coke a month and was considered a major player in the D.C. area. When Ray and his team were arrested, it made headlines all over the world. I wasn't old enough to remember, but I did my homework and seen exclusive coverage from several news sources outside the city. So analyzing the situation now, all these years later, I can tell a lot of people genuinely like Rayful as a person.
He wasn't really a selfish type person. He used to, like I said, he used to take the kids out, get them a little money, take them to McDonald's and stuff like that.
Young people are flocking to the trial.
We wasn't real close, but he was a friend of mine. As you know, he waved yesterday, and I'm just showing my respect by being down here.
A lot of people are responsible for the crack era. People outside of the city, outside of the country. Cocaine has to travel from a source, and humans have to decide to indulge from a hustling standpoint and as a user.
The gang, allegedly led by 24-year-old Rayful Edmond, reportedly sold 1,700 pounds of cocaine a month, bought directly from the Notorious Crips gang in Los Angeles.
These are some of the children of the crack era in D.C. Middle schoolers in the Dreamers program. They were getting ready to transition into high school, and for some, later on, college, with a promise of their tuition being paid in full by a millionaire named George Kettle. He wanted to give back by motivating the youth to finish school.
Graduation ceremonies will be held Monday at the Winston Education Center in Anacostia, an impoverished area of Washington, D.C. that's also fallen victim to an epidemic of drug use, drug trafficking, and drug-related violence. Some of the graduates will have a very good chance of breaking out of that environment of poverty and crime because one man who can afford to has decided to help.
George Kettle, grown wealthy at real estate in the Washington area, told 60 elementary school children 2 years ago that he will pay their college tuition if they complete high school. All this is part of a program called I Have a Dream, begun 8 years ago by New York millionaire Eugene Lang with a similar promise to ghetto children in Harlem. Now the Dreamers have grown to programs in 31 cities involving more than 9,000 students and more than 125 sponsors, such as George Kettle.
He helps me with my personal problems, and Mr. Kettle, he tries to help me, and a lot of things that I didn't have now I have.
You were told about this program, what, 2 years ago?
Yes.
Did you believe it?
No.
Why not?
Because it was too good to be true.
Not everyone made it. Like I said, it was the crack era.
It's hard to drop out of the program. We've had students who've been in trouble with the law.
Arrested?
And we've had students that have been arrested.
Arrested for cocaine, I understand.
Arrested for possession with the intent to distribute.
Most of the youngsters come from poor families. Only a few live with both parents, and hardly any could figure to afford college on their own.
Middle school is the critical period where most will make that decision to go down the wrong path or fly straight and stay out the way. In elementary, most of the kids are too young to get involved with anything street. And that's not all. You always have an exception, and during the crack era, there were probably more of those exceptions than today, but the parents typically still got a hold on their kids at that point in elementary. But as we grow and experience a little more independence, that's when you get youngins stepping out on the streets, young dealers and killers begin taking their training wheels off. Homicide records were set 4 years in a row by the early 90s with victims of all kinds, especially young ones. But a large number of those bodies found were guys heavy in the streets, and a boosted murder rate in D.C. was the result of turf wars, some of which I covered on the channel, like the Jamaican wars in D.C., about the posses who were vicious themselves and flooded the inner cities of America.
Federal agents in 20 states have begun arresting hundreds of people alleged to be members of some of the most violent gangs in America, the Jamaican drug posses.
The arrests started last night in cities across the country. Authorities say members of the Jamaican gangs known as posses are involved in drug dealing, violent wars over turf, and more.
Police say Jamaican drug gangs may have been behind a deadly nightclub shooting.
They lost a lot of soldiers in D.C. The Jamaicans was nothing to play with. They would shoot first and ask questions later. They laid some folks down everywhere they touched down, including D.C. and including their own, men, women, and children. But from the conversations I had and the newspaper clips I seen, they were being found everywhere. And old timers will tell you, a lot of them got the hell out the city after a while. A major drug bust broke up a lot of that also. Everybody wanted in on the drug trade, even the police.
In the nation's capital, a real police investigation is underway.
Still, for the next year, 2 local agencies and the FBI will be investigating. Money scandals, incompetence, and extortion are nothing new in Washington, but this time the focus is on the police.
The Washington Post called it one of the most embarrassing chapters in D.C. police history. 12 officers who were arrested and charged with aiding a phony drug ring in a federal undercover operation. They took the bait and it backfired, and the media called them the Dirty Dozen. It all started with one ex-cop who was approached by an informant working alongside the FBI. After claims of crooked cops working in the city, the FBI agent, Jose, acting as a dealer, set it up where the officer went to Florida thinking he was about to work for some major drug plugs, looking after shipments of drugs traveling from one place to another, basically escorting the package. It was all a setup. So throughout the fake operation, more officers were recruited, including ex-officer Hackney right here, who became a cop in 1990. 12 in total with one lady officer, and everything was of course recorded. It was the FBI. They had the surveillance, audio recordings of the officers. They accepted money. They did a dummy cocaine run, which was nothing more than kilos of grade A sugar.
You want some Kool-Aid?
Man, you know I want some Kool-Aid.
Grape or red?
Red. All that sugar.
The FBI had recently done a sting on a mayor, arresting him at the top of 1990, and just a couple years later, they were right back at it, doing these runs to set up 12 officers after an informant says one of the officers was crooked. Either way, it worked. They took the bait and all were eventually arrested 1 year later when the FBI had enough. 3 of the 12 took it to trial. They lost and received more than 40 plus years in prison without parole. The other 9 took a plea deal and they probably all home right now. When we talk about the horrors of the crack cocaine trade, obviously many were affected on both sides of the law, but none had it worse than those who were murdered in cold blood. Ain't no coming back from it. One murder during that period that seemed like it was straight out of an Italian gangster movie because of how it was done was the murder of Gary Terrell, also known as Big Head Gary. It made me think of a line from Donnie Brasco, the movie, where the guy named Lefty said, "In our thing, when you get sent for, you go in alive and come out dead, and it's your best friend that does it."
In our thing, you get sent for, you go in alive, you come out dead, and it's your best friend that does it.
That was a chilling scene. You got different types of killers in the world, some who kill for the sport of killing. Thrill seekers. Some kill for power, control, or a need to assert dominance. Mass murderers, and more. The next part is based on the accounts of Alpo Martinez and retired FBI agent Dan Riley.
We jump in this kid's MPV van, because we used to like using an MPV van because they had the little side compartments. We could throw the pistols in there if the police pull us over.
Gary didn't have a clue. The MPV van that he entered was full of killers who he thought were allies. He trusted them enough to ride with him, and according to Alpo, he even fell asleep at one point.
Gary was getting kind of sleepy, so he's like dozed off for a minute.
Nobody ever heard a man confess so casually to murder the way Poe did. And law enforcement called the MPV van the murder van due to them finding blood from multiple victims. In the vehicle was, of course, Poe, Wayne, others I won't mention, and Tyrone Price.
Tyrone could knock you out with one hit of his fist. Wayne liked that.
Tyrone Price was down with Wayne. He was about 9 years older than him. Rest in peace. His reign on the streets came to a halt with him, MJ, and Wayne being hit with a 27-count indictment that included 9 murders. The indictment claimed that Tyrone Price was involved in the murders of 2 informants and 1 rival dealer in '91. The dealer was Gary. So Gary's fate was already sealed the moment he stepped in the van. As many of us already know, they took him out. And the body was found near Rock Creek Park. This is all documented. One of my contacts was a part of a crew in the neighborhood that Wayne and Poe would both frequent from time to time. Potomac Gardens. He said Wayne and Poe came through the gardens plenty of times. I watched WP extort niggas right in front of my face. People literally got out his way when he came through, but also, he almost got hit one day and didn't see it coming. My man wouldn't give one of our killers the Uzi. Nothing like the Gardens, bro. No other hood got in our business. Outside of the Gardens is hella gentrified, but this public housing community is just 13 blocks from the U.S. Capitol. Potomac Gardens was once an open-air drug market back in the 80s and 90s. In fact, it was one of the biggest. The Gardens itself is split between senior and family housing.
Yeah, so they put these fences up right here in 91. Well, they started it in 91, then they completed it in 92. You saw the building? Huh? You saw the building? Did I see him?
In this photo is Martin Rich, a well-loved hustler from the Gardens. In the streets, he came up under heavyweights, names like Red Ronnie, big-time moneymakers from the Gardens. Martin ended up falling victim to the streets. At the time, D.C. was the murder cap. He was tortured and killed and found in PG County, Maryland. According to my contact, Martin was kidnapped. He was able to make a call while in custody and told his peoples to put the dope and the money at a certain location around the Gardens so the kidnappers could get it. He also told them not to wait, not to ambush whoever was picking it up. They did as told. But ultimately, Martin was killed. You can see his face was duct taped and handcuffs were on him. The date was January 14th, 1992. The feds added this murder to the Wayne Perry investigation files. Although Wayne didn't claim this, and for the record, we not making any claims as far as who did what. We just painting a picture according to what's already been documented. Like I said, they love Martin around the Gardens. Some of the guys suspected Wayne. They felt he knew who did the work. My contact said Wayne was there alone by himself one day. He had no clue what was taking place not far from him in the hallway. A killer was arguing with another man who had a Uzi that he wanted specifically to retaliate after the murder of Martin, and Wayne didn't see it coming. Ex-NBA player Sherman Douglas, who played for the Miami Heat and like 4 other teams, is from Potomac Gardens. He was in the league from 1989 to 2001 and nicknamed the General.
Their second pick in that draft, they chose Sherman Douglas, another well-known college player. He had a terrific career as the point guard at Syracuse. He was Ronnie Cycli's point guard when they were in college together.
He would go inside, in between the tree trunks, so to speak, in the redwood forest, and come up with amazing lollipop shots.
I was told that a locally famous drink some people tuning in who not from the area may not know about, the O-Cup, according to my contact, started from a guy named Omar from the Gardens.
Then the pain and trouble besetting our children. A generation of young people that many say we have lost to drugs, instant gratification, and violence, to the overwhelming sense that they have no place in our lives. Washington must rise up and proclaim once and for all that 703 killings is enough. We won't have it no more.
During the crack era, things got so bad that Mayor Sharon Pratt Kelly had an iron fence put around the complex. Some people took issue with it, and the objective was to keep out the criminals, but some folks saw it as a prison fence, cutting people off from the rest of the city. My guy said they started getting more money because the police had limited access points after the fence was put up. The Gardens was a one-stop shop as far as the drug game, crack cocaine, heroin, and more. Capitol Hill's finest, and the users came from everywhere to buy. People would smoke crack in the hallways. You could find dope fiends nodding out. Heroin needles were all around, scattered on the ground. According to the Washington Post, dealers sold heroin that they named Peter Pan and Run Joe. Crack dealers would range in age, some as young as 8 years old around Potomac Gardens. This was in the late 80s. It was said that a 12-year-old dealer was widely known as one of the most aggressive dealers in the Gardens at that time, and he was known to carry wads of cash and a 9mm in his shoulder holster. The crime at Potomac Gardens gained national attention when a popular TV show host named Geraldo Rivera decided to do a special titled Bloody Streets and Broken Dreams on the Gardens. More than 400 people met in the parking lot. They were at the Salvation Army Chapel on the corner of 12th and G Street Southeast. They all wanted to be a part of the special. Some were there to share their grievances. Some was looking for that spotlight. A hustler was heard saying, "I don't know why he came here. Yes, the Gardens have killers in it, but it ain't worse than Willow Road, Valley Green, or Drake Place. In the Gardens, you mess up somebody's money, you dead. But on Willow Road, you can get shot just trying to buy drugs." One lady named Cynthia Harris, who founded the Stop the Madness Foundation, even said, "This will not end until there is a grassroots effort." I can't say if anything good came from the Geraldo special for the Gardens. But what I can say is, well after that situation was over, the Gardens was still hella active. 1992, police and the FBI raided the Gardens. They found $12,000 worth of crack, heroin, ammunition, and $1,000 in cash. And all of this was just a portion of the operation. They arrested 13 people that day. One of the arrests you can see pictured here. And sometime later, in comes the Nation of Islam security company.
In fact, what a distinguished dais. We have members of the city council.
So don't look at the Muslims like we're strange. Come on. We just got some sense.
The Clifton Terrace apartment. The flurry of gunfire was aimed at members of the Nation of Islam, not unlike those in other major cities where black Muslims, frequently from the ranks of ex-convicts, are aggressively seeking building security contracts, most often in neighborhoods that have proven too mean and too dangerous for ordinary security guards.
We are not a violent people. We will only use that force which is necessary when, obviously, we are advanced or aggressed upon.
The Nation of Islam security firm was getting contracts in the 80s and 90s to guard and protect neighborhoods. In a 4-year span, the security firm won an estimated $20 million in public contracts in 20 cities, including D.C. and Baltimore. Now, as you can see, they had their hands full. You could hear a shot go off in broad daylight around Clifton Terrace. They won a $30,000 emergency contract to patrol the Gardens for 2.5 weeks. They came in well organized. They patrolled and even ran drug customers away. Some dealers moved across the street to deal drugs, but other folks formed together and lashed out at the NOI guards. One threw a bottle, striking them. Fights even broke out. According to an eyewitness, a couple of the guards got knocked out, and more NOI members came back one evening, and it was on from there. And while some older residents were happy for their presence, young men from the hood wasn't. The guards spotted someone with a gun. They tried to question them. People were agitated, and somehow a resident ended up with a gash on their head. No gun was recovered though. But the third and most vicious incident occurred about 2:30 p.m. in 1995. While the police were meeting with the guards, a resident stabbed the Nation of Islam guard in the chest. This photo, courtesy of the Washington Post, is showing that guard being carried out on a stretcher. And this is a photo of the man who was arrested and charged with the stabbing. I'm not sure if the guard survived. I was told one of the Nation of Islam guards was killed around the gardens. I searched, but I couldn't find anything confirming if this guy survived or not. A reporter said that his lung may have been punctured after they rushed him to D.C. General. And I gotta keep it unbiased and give these guys some credit though. To come into these communities, man, we talking about rough areas, the 80s, the 90s, what some people refer to as the Wild Wild West when it come to the district. Put their life on the line, patrolling the gardens. They had their work cut out for them. It's no secret that the crack trade caused a lot of chaos in the city and definitely contributed to the prison population increase. Also in 1999 and the year 2000, according to an indictment, Delafield Mob, or the 4th and Delafield crew, and the Mahdi brothers were at war. The Delafield crew was around the 300 block of Delafield Place Northwest, and the Mahdi boys, also known as the 1-4 Assassins, were operating near the 1300 blocks of Shepherd Street, Randolph, and Taylor Streets Northwest. Some of the brothers were heavy into music in the early 90s, going by the names The Freakmen and Malik Mahdi. Together they were the Mahdi Mob, which you can find articles online with their music collection as well as on YouTube.
Just like the wild Northwest, where best for you get a 38 or a Glock. Who's the mob? Is that the question? Niggas wanna know at my jam session.
They got a RIP to Michael Frey Salters on the back of the album in the credits. But as far as on the street side, there was a joint investigation by MPD, DEA, ATF that claimed that 5 of the Mahdi boys, all brothers, was getting serious money uptown. But when they got into it with the Delafield crew, neither was backing down and both crews were gunning for one another. Unfortunately, an innocent bystander got hit in the process, May 17th, year 2000. A 39-year-old woman was shot on her porch, which members from Delafield Mob was charged with.
Eva Hernandez, a mother of 3, was shot on her porch as she was carrying laundry into her home.
The Mahdis were targeted a lot, 18 shootings, and they struck back at least 8 times according to the prosecution. A reporter stated people were scared to come out the house or walk down the street at the time when both crews were active. The leader of the Delafield crew was given 109 years in 2004. Mahdi members were hit with the RICO. By that time, it's been at least 17 years since crack hit the city. It's been years since the feds patted themselves on the back for putting away the Rifle organization.
Bitch ass. Reach on wine, my son, I'm a crush. On Hawk, I'm a crush.
Knock off his muff. Sambo told me to crush. What the fuck I'ma do, crush? I'ma get up over nothing. You know I got it from hustling. Her nigga with me be doubling. Bring her chop out jumping it. Run up on me and I'm crushing him. Bitch ass nigga is nothing. I shot a nigga for bluff. Switches on glizzy's cut. You hear that crush? You hear that fat shit bust, turn them to ketchup mustard, I don't do none of that bluffing, every nigga with me a bus. I take the nigga that go in the choir, but I was an usher, fuck it, I went in the church for doubling hundreds and butter, after I went to the church, but can't forget I sold butter, when the fuck did I learn nothing from my pocket, the shit from my mother, my mother was selling the yay. My father, he been in the way. I kept spinning niggas' way. I did this shit every day. I switched the legs in the drink. Pulling the drums to their face. Nigga run up and get sprayed. I burn his ass to him made. I spread his ass out the water. I burn his ass like some raid. My niggas pulling up a bomb. I probably dropping off grenades. You know I come with big pumps. I never shot a 12 gauge. You know I flash out and rage. You hear that water, you a wave.
We went from major drug crews, fighting for control of drug markets that resulted in murder and prison, becoming a cycle of rinse and repeat over the years. But crack ain't king no more, and go-go music ain't the soundtrack of the streets today. Now it's DMV drill. Now it's fentanyl, a synthetic opioid that is up to 50 times stronger than heroin and 100 times stronger than morphine, according to the CDC.
Fentanyl is intensifying this problem.
Fentanyl. One pill can kill.
Fentanyl.
Fentanyl.
Many people will die from drug overdose, but they don't care.
It's the harsh reality destroying families across our region. Fentanyl, whether in powder form or in pills, is a highly potent drug, the driving force of deadly overdoses in recent years.
In order to drive the market, to make more money, to make more people addicted to fentanyl, there's frankly duping people into taking pills that otherwise thought they were taking some other pill.
The Drug Enforcement Administration blaming Mexican drug cartels, infiltrating communities by selling fake pills containing fentanyl. And it's at this lab for the DEA's Washington Division where forensic chemist Jacqueline Brown is testing recently seized drugs, waiting for a few hours to determine if they're laced with the synthetic opioid. Brown says lately her team is mostly seeing counterfeit oxycodone, also known as M30s.
We have here are two different colors of M30s. So one is like a dusty blue and one is more aqua blue, but these both contain fentanyl, around 1 to 2%.
It may sound like a small amount, but officials stress ingesting 2 milligrams of fentanyl, seen here next to a penny, is enough to kill. The DEA showcasing to WSA 9 examples of fake pills and Xanax bars. They may look normal, but don't be fooled.
Unfortunately, there is no way to know what the pill you are buying illicitly is containing.
Unless it's a prescription from your doctor or pharmacy, the DEA says don't assume the pills you get are the real deal. Some of the most vulnerable victims have been our youth, teens targeted by drug cartels by promoting on social media like TikTok and Snapchat.
Para nuestros hijos.
It's been on the mind of many families across the DMV after several reports of youth overdoses in schools this year.
We've had seasoned chemists who have been on the bench for 20 years who cannot tell the difference. We don't know unless we run it on our instruments.
For now, federal agents here are conducting their own enforcement through their latest campaign, One Pill Can Kill, keeping these chemists busy, each one now assigned to analyze the abundance of drugs coming in.
The agents in this area in Maryland, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. are seizing these pills on a daily basis.
In just last year, the DEA says agents seized more than 8 million potentially doses of fentanyl in our region. That's about nearly 160,000 fake pills and more than 250 pounds of fentanyl powder. But it's not just the pills containing fentanyl. They can be found in heroin, cocaine, and meth.
Crack destroyed the black community, no question. And the heroin epidemic was deadly, but the difference with fentanyl today is white children are dying from it as well as blacks. So the government got to keep the microscope on the problem and approach things differently. Someone even commented on a Twitter post about the fentanyl trafficking bust and said, when heroin flooded every corner of DC, no one cared because it was in black neighborhoods and the users were black. Today, when someone dies from the new heroin fentanyl, you get a federal indictment and charged with murder. Funny how things change when others are affected. One girl who USA 9 described as a young DC mother named Diamond Lynch died of an overdose of what they call counterfeit oxycodone pills in 2021.
These drugs helping these kids reach thoughts that they can't reach sober, and they falling in love with that when they come into the booth.
Has recently tested positive for fentanyl.
Fentanyl killing all the junkies who been junkies.
I don't think any drug is risking your life.
I'm talking, it's killing the junkies who been junkies for forever.
Yes.
Soon as they hit it, they dead. When have you ever heard crackheads hitting the pipe and dying the first time?
Never.
Never. This fentanyl shit is different.
You know, your life is more important than a fucking high. So, you know, like I said, a couple of years ago, people sniff coke, do whatever they want to do, and not have a worry in the world. Now, everybody's fucking dying off of fentanyl.
You know, they say art imitate life. But I say life imitate art because whenever something becomes popular in rap, it goes viral in the community. For instance, 3 6 Mafia said on the record,
"Let me see your tongue ring."
At that time, plenty of young teenage girls were all getting tongue rings. What may have been a local thing in several cities went viral. Dudes started rapping about my girl got a girlfriend, and the females started calling each other wifey and messing with each other for real.
My girl and keep the other one. My girl got a girlfriend. My girl got a girlfriend. My girl got a girlfriend.
Hey, girls want girls where I'm from. Yeah.
Own house. She got her own car.
Also, they started talking about doing Percocets and lean, and then people followed.
Sipping on some scissors. Fuck you pull up to the party and forget the perks.
I stopped sipping lean for real. Cause it slowed up my day.
People been drinking syrup for years.
Life imitate art when it comes to the culture of rap. So when Chicago became Chirac, they went viral, showing the world something we never really seen before. Dissing the dead. Smoking the op. Using real situations to promote their game. In and out of the music world. And it wouldn't be long before others follow suit all over the country, especially in the DMV.
Ma, bitch. Yeah.
So many artists on the come up are catching cases, and many of them have been murdered for all types of reasons, which we won't even go into. One by one, they each have fallen victim to gunfire. The craziest part is, most of them were all talented and had great potential. Today, we putting up damn near half the numbers as the height of the crack era with 200 bodies last year in 2022. And we so numb to murder, we forget DC ain't but so big, and 200 homicides is a lot, especially in a more gentrified DC with cameras everywhere. Rest in peace to the fallen thousands. Now we can officially move on, covering the start of the DC Moors, more street legends from the 60s and 70s, Odessa Marjorie, and much, much more. Thanks for tuning in. Please like, share, comment, all of the above, man. It's Jay checking out.
So we blew up, took 30 G's worth of juice off that nigga sewer. So now I'm out of my man's land. She decide like sand. Wait, they rolling in my right hand. Yo, you know the streets so black, gotta go down like that. Cologne, cigars, and more half. What do you believe in? Heaven or hell? You don't believe in heaven cause you're living in hell. What do you believe in? Boy, heaven or hell? You don't believe in heaven cause you're living in hell. What do you believe in? Heaven